So first of all, before we get started, I'd like to do a little grounding exercise. And it's just a breathing exercise which brings us all together. It aligns us and it entrains us. And it doesn't matter when you're watching this, if you're watching this sometime in the future, if somebody else is watching it at another time. What happens is, because time and space doesn't exist beyond this three-dimensional world, we all align with each other when we're watching this, when we just ground ourselves and align our breathing. So I'd like you to start now with just 3 breaths and just follow my cue so that we're all doing it together. Let's take our first breath in and out. Long, slow breath. The second breath in and out. And the third breath in and out. What this does is that it aligns your energy with everybody who's watched this already and who has yet to watch it, so that we can actually magnify everything that we're going to learn from this course. And it's my hope that each and every one of you watching will get from it what you need. You'll get exactly what you require. So I want to speak a little bit about what informs my thinking. And many of you probably already know that I had a near-death experience back in 2006. So let me just tell you a little bit about what happened. At the end of 2005, I actually had end-stage cancer when a doctor told me that I had 3 months to live. After I heard that, my health went on a rapid decline. And by February of 2006, I was at the final stages of my life. At that point, I weighed about 86 pounds. My body had stopped absorbing nutrition. I was connected to machines, tubes. I had nutrition piped into me. And because my body had stopped absorbing nutrition, my muscles had completely deteriorated, and I could no longer walk. I couldn't even sit up like I am now. My head would be hanging down because I didn't even have the strength in my own upper body or my neck to hold my head up. And I was either in a wheelchair or lying in bed, but my lungs were filled with fluid, so I couldn't even lie flat on my bed. I had to be propped up, because if I lay flat, I would be choking on my own fluid. It's still very hard for me to share this because today when I think back to it, first of all, it feels very emotional. But secondly, it feels like I'm talking about a different person. It doesn't even feel like me. But on February the 2nd, 2006, I was lying in a hospital bed dying. And I went into a coma. And I had tumors the size of golf balls from the base of my skull, all around my neck, under my arms, in my chest, and all the way down to my abdomen. It was lymphatic cancer, so it had spread throughout my lymphatic system. And I looked like a complete skeleton. And I went into a coma. And the doctors told my family that these were the final hours, not even days, but the final hours. And my organs started to shut down one by one. It started with my kidneys, and then the other organs were starting to shut down. And unbeknownst to everybody around me, even though I was in a coma now, and my family were distraught because they were told this was it. I wasn't going to come out of the coma. Unbeknownst to everyone around me, I had actually left my body. So as soon as I went into the coma, I felt I was no longer attached to my body. And I was aware of my physical body that was lying in the hospital bed. And it was as though I was looking at my physical body on the bed. But I felt incredible. Like I had been dealing with the cancer for 4 years. And during the 4 years, I had dealt with so much pain and so much fear. I feared the cancer. I feared the treatment for the cancer. I feared death. And so I fought and fought against the cancer. And towards the end, I suffered from a lot of discomfort and pain. And now I'd left my body, I felt incredible. I felt light and I felt free. It was just the most incredible feeling ever. And I don't recall ever feeling this way in life, in physical life, ever before. And one feeling that I recall more than anything is a feeling of being bathed in, I guess, what I call love, unconditional love. And that's the only way I can describe it. But it was not like a love that I feel here that I've ever felt in my life here in the physical. It was just incredible. And I use the term unconditional love, but the word unconditional is actually superfluous, because if love is conditional, then it's not love. But I just felt like I was bathed in this feeling of just incredible, like, comfort and safety, like I was home. I'd finally come home. And I felt for the first time that not only was the pain gone, but the fear was gone. It was like I had nothing to fear and I had nothing to prove. And to me, that was a big part of recognizing that this love was different from anything I had felt in the physical. It was like, for the first time, I realized I didn't have to prove myself to be loved. I realized I was loved just because I existed. And I can't even describe exactly where or who or what the love was coming from, but it was a feeling like, I feel I'm home and I'm safe. But I also felt that I was surrounded by beings. And I recognized some of the beings. One of them was my dad, who had passed 10 years prior. But I didn't recognize many of the beings. But they were very loving and kind towards me. And it was like they were there to help me and to greet me. And I realized that I was dying. I was going through the dying process. But I was also aware of what was happening in the room that I was in. My family were there, and I was aware that my family were actually grieving and they were distraught. And I wanted them to know that I'm fine. I feel great. You don't have to grieve for me. I feel amazing. But of course, I had no biology. I was separate from my physical body. I had no voice, no vocal cords with which to speak. I didn't even have eyes to see. So it was very different from looking at things with physical eyes. You know, when you use your physical eyes, you actually have to turn your head and you have to focus and you have to look. But this was more like a 360-degree awareness. I was aware of everything that was happening around my physical body and beyond. And I could hear the conversations that were taking place between the doctors and my family. And I could see and hear the doctor telling my family that these were my final hours and I wasn't going to make it through the night. And of course, none of them were aware I could see and hear this. A lot of these conversations took place outside of the room. I reached a point where I realized that I had a choice as to whether to come back into my physical body or to continue in that realm. And at first, no part of me wanted to come back into my physical body because it was so amazing in that realm. I felt I had suffered a lot during this physical life. Even though I had an amazing marriage with a beautiful husband, I still felt life was hard. I felt life was tough for me. I'd always really struggled with just living, with just doing life. And I'd never understood why. But now here I was in this realm, and it was like being in a state of clarity. I started to understand what it was that had caused me to be lying on that hospital bed dying. I understood how all my thoughts, my decisions, and the choices I had made up until that point had led me to now be in this state of dying. And with that understanding, my dad, whose spirit it was on the other side, was the one that encouraged me. And he said to me that now that you understand what it is that has caused you to get sick and that has caused you to struggle, you should go back. He also wanted me to know that I had a purpose that I hadn't yet finished, and that if I went back, I would be able to complete my purpose. I realized also that my husband's and my purpose was linked, and if I didn't come back, he wouldn't be able to complete his purpose either. And I just wanted to say here that my husband, Danny, is an incredible person. He was by my bedside the whole time. I mean, he didn't go to work. He lost his job. He didn't leave my side the whole time I was sick. And I have to say, he's a huge reason why I came back. He's a huge reason why I'm here. And I often jokingly tell him that he's not allowed to leave this planet before him. And if he does, I actually tell him, if you leave before me, I'll kill you. So, and I'm not kidding. Because, he just makes life better for me. And I'll speak a lot more about things like this during the rest of this course, about the importance of having a purpose, about the importance of having passion and love and all of these things. But being in that state, it really changed the way I view life. And I realized that during my lifetime, that it was my dad who had instilled fear in me. I didn't have a good relationship with my dad at all growing up. I was never able to win his approval. I spent my entire life just trying to win his approval and dance around in circles for him just to get his attention. So during life, I really struggled with my dad. And he was the one that instilled in me the fear. What was it that I used to fear? I used to fear everything from fear of disapproval, fear of disappointing people, fear of being disliked, fear of not fitting in. I used to also fear cancer. I used to fear everything, just about everything. So during life, it was my dad who instilled fear in me. But here on the other side now, my dad was telling me, you need to go back. You need to go back and live your life fearlessly. So it was in death that my dad freed me from that very fear that he had actually impacted me with during my life. When my dad said, you need to go back and live your life fearlessly, that was when I started to actually come out of the coma. And I'd been in the coma for about 30 some hours. And, when we're on the other side, I mentioned we don't have physical bodies. My dad came to me not as a physical body, but it's like when we're without our bodies, we are just spiritual or energy beings, pure consciousness. We lose everything. We lose our religion, our ethnicity, our culture, our gender, and we are just pure consciousness. And so when we communicate with each other, we have no vocal cords. We have no physical bodies. I recognized him because you just know. So what you're dealing with on that side is a pure knowingness, a pure awareness. So it was my dad's awareness and my awareness. And you just kind of enmesh, you come together and you know everything that person wants you to know. And so when I was with my dad on that side, he wanted me to know that he loved me unconditionally and that he had always loved me. But he just never knew how to show it. It was our cultural upbringing, what I call our marinade, because when you are immersed, steeped in a particular culture or community, and we all are in our own individual lives and communities and upbringings and cultures, that is what I call our marinade. And our marinade shapes us. So it was my dad's marinade that made him who he was. And he wanted me to know that underneath that, he had always loved me unconditionally, but just never knew how to show it. And so he told me, go back and live your life fearlessly because you have some gifts waiting for you and you haven't completed your purpose. So I started to open my eyes and come out of the coma. And I realized I'd been in the coma for some 30-something hours, and there was my family standing around me, my wonderful husband, my mom, who has since transitioned and is now on the other side. But at that time, she was right there. My brother was there. And I remember being a little bit like 1 foot here and 1 foot there. I was a little bit discombobulated, to say the least. And I was saying things like, Dad's here, and I'm going to be fine. It's not my time. I still have things to do. I'm going to be okay. And everybody thought I was delusional or it was the drugs that was affecting me. And the doctor came in and I immediately said, oh, that's Dr. Chan. Isn't he the one that said I'm not going to make it through the night? And everyone said, how could you possibly have heard that? He didn't even say that in the room. But he told my family not to get your hopes up, that I was still, that it was the drugs and I was still critical. And I just kept saying, no, I know I'm going to be fine. And within 4 or 5 days, I wanted to sit up in the bed. I wanted all the wires taken out. The tumors started shrinking and the doctors could feel them shrinking to the touch. Within 3 weeks, they could find no trace of cancer in my body. And the focus then became on me building up my strength so that I could go and live my life. And the doctors had a hard time believing this and believing even the test results. I remember at one point, when they took the tests, when they took my scans, the radiologist who was given my previous scans as a comparison, he really thought that he had received the wrong records. And I could hear him calling back to the people who keep the files and saying, have you sent me the right files? There seems to be something wrong here. This scan that I just did doesn't even show that there's any indication of cancer. And this was taken just 3 weeks after the previous scans, which had showed all the tumors throughout my body. And I remember them getting completely confused. And so I spent some time getting my strength back, getting my mobility back into my legs. And on March the 9th, 2006, which was about 5 weeks after the near-death experience, I went home to live my life cancer-free. And here I am today sharing what I learned with you, because to me, this is so important. When I came out of that coma, one of the things I felt is, why did it take death for me to learn this? Why doesn't everybody know this? And these are the things I want to share in this course, the things I learned. I knew that if I knew now, like if I knew what I learned in the near-death experience, if I had known it before, I never would have got sick in the first place. That's what I knew. So I started to wonder if a lot of people were sick or a lot of people were suffering and struggling in their life because of how their life shaped them, because of their marinade, which is what was the case for me. Or it was because of their nature, and their nature being an empath. And that's something that I became passionate about because of that. Because what I had never recognized before the near-death experience even, I was always somebody who wanted to please people. I was always somebody that was really, really fearful of being judged, really fearful of being shamed. Being shamed was a huge one for me. And so I would do things, not because I want to do them, but do things because I want to avoid being shamed. I want to avoid being criticized. I want people to like me. And I'm sure many of you listening relate to this. So that's only one part of being an empath, is that you don't want to displease people. But another part of it is that I used to get affected by the people around me, by the energies around me. I didn't recognize any of this until after I died and came back. So this is why I want to teach this to people, because I want you to know you don't have to die to get this information. You shouldn't have to die. And, and sometimes for people when they die, it's too late. They don't get to come back. So this is why it's so important for me to share this information. And as I've started to share it, it has blown my mind how many people relate to it, which is why I keep sharing it, and which is why I really want this kind of information to spread.